So on to the Daniel J. Morrell.
Yep.
Again, I'm going to say it. We know what happened. This is movie material to me, a major motion picture. 28 of the 29 crewmen, church bell chime, pillar ring 29 times, in this case 28. So just one survivor. The Morrell was an iron ore carrier, and before it sank in Lake Huron, November 29th, 1966. Before we get to the specifics of the ship, you've already mentioned him, but he's the centerpiece of the story. Dennis Hale, the watchman, 26-year-old watchman from Ashtabula, Ohio, the sole survivor, found floating in a life raft for 40 hours with 3 deceased crewmen who one by one went by the wayside, succumbed to those conditions. You met him, you had a beer with him. Tell me about Dennis Hale.
As I alluded to earlier, I met him and Frank Mays at the Fitzgerald Memorial thing. Years later, see, he was literally going crazy because why should I be the only survivor, you know? And he went to see a psychiatrist, and he didn't get nowhere there, so he ended up going to a different psychiatrist. And he told him, you got to open up about this. You cannot keep this bottled inside. It'll just eat you up.
So he was afflicted with that all his life? Like, why did I get out alive?
Until that psychiatrist said, you got to start giving talks about this and get this out of your system, and you're going to feel a whole lot better. So we tried it, and sure enough, he started feeling better because he just wanted to sit in a corner and cry, you know. And the more talks he gave, the better he felt. And it was at the Sandusky Theater, if I remember correctly, in Sandusky, Ohio, that myself and Captain Jack Lamb, then at the time he was the captain of the Shirley Irene, which is a car ferry out of Marblehead going to Kelly's Island, okay? And his son, Captain Joe Lamb, I worked with him on a Jet Express, both captains. They're friends with Dennis Hale. So we're all sitting together listening to his talk, and he answered some questions, and everybody files out. Dennis Hale comes over and says, "Now, what do you guys want to do?" And Jack goes, "Let's go get a hamburger, you know." So we go to a local watering hole. I can't remember where it was now. We said, and I cannot remember what Dennis Hale drank, if he drank. That part of it eludes me, because Jack and Joe and myself made up for the whatever he did or did not drink, you know. But he regaled us on the story, and he was a problem child. He the minute he was born, his mother died. His mother died giving birth to it because he was a big baby, 11 pounds 2 ounces, something like that.
Yeah, he was a big man.
So his dad hated him because he took his wife from him, and his brothers hated him because so he was always this outcast. Okay, and he went to live with his aunt, but his aunt ended up moving to California. Got a job or something. And at 13, he could pass for 18. He was such a big kid. He started running away from home. And he'd hitchhike all the way out to California. And when he was at the house, every winter, he'd sleep with the windows open because it was so hot. He had all his heat in him. And as he would hitchhike, he didn't want to get arrested for vagrancy, so he'd find some newspaper and shove it down his shirt and his pants. Find 2 pieces of cardboard, one to lay on and one to get on top. So he was used to this cold weather all the time. Okay, he ran away from home and hitchhiked I don't know how many times back across the United States. The reason I got along so good with him is because when I rode my motorcycle from California to Toledo, I took the old Route 66, right?
Oh, what a great trip.
My ass still hurts. Oh, man, let me shift my position here. Anyway, buddy of mine just got a new 750. He says, take this little Honda 160, because I was on a hitchhike. I wanted to hitchhike. He says, take this bike, and wherever it breaks down, finish it up. Well, I made Terre Haute, Indiana. The chain kept breaking. And it's a Sunday, and I can't fix the chain no more, so left the bike at a gas station, put it out, and I hitchhiked from Terre Haute, Indiana to Toledo. And when he heard that, we clicked just like this.
He's Dennis Hale.
Because of the hitchhiking factor. See, it just changed his whole demeanor. Now we're good time buddies. I mean, he was before, but now he's really opening up.
Yeah, you can't share those hitchhike stories with anyone else because nobody hitchhikes anymore. The world's too dangerous. Was Dennis Hale a proud man? I mean, to have survived, the only survivor from the Morrell. I mean, what a story to carry with you all his life. I know in addition to suffering as a child after that wreck, you know, it took years before he got feeling back in his hands and his feet. He went through at least a
His
dozen.
armpit. He walked with a limp the day I saw him. He couldn't go
He had a
walk.
dozen surgeries after that. I mean, the man suffered
yeah.
greatly for this, and to carry that story all his life.
To say he was proud of that, I'm sure he felt fortunate. I think if there's a word I would describe, because that's why he was going crazy for. Because why did I survive and everybody else didn't? This is to relive those screams, and as the wind is pushing them guys farther away, they couldn't make it back to
40
the raft.
hours in that raft in freezing cold weather. They were literally freezing. We know Dennis Hale had on a pea coat, boxer shorts, nothing else on the legs, and a life jacket. He attributed to some of that to his survival, because everyone else had the pants on, and their bodies were frozen, literally.
Yes. And he explained that, and I can explain it in a minute or so. When he went to bed that night, he got off watch and was laying down in his cabin. He had on a pair of underwear. That was it. And it was it 2:00 in the morning when I said there? Let's see there.
2:00, and then it broke at 2:15.
The general alarm went off. And of course, you're trained, buddy. I mean, the only time you hear that is when you're going to do a lifeboat drill at 2:00 in the morning. You ain't doing no lifeboat drills. And the noise this boat was making, he thought it was the anchors, hitting the bow there.
Away.
He got up, he grabbed his life jacket, and he put it on. He goes up on our upper deck. What's he got? He's got his life jacket on, K-Pock with filled with inside like a little bladder, you know what I mean, with air in there, and he had his underwear. Was it? And he was aghast to see what was going on. The whole middle section of that boat was hogged up like this. Then she'd come down like this, and the stern would go up. And they're yelling, "Hey, get in the raft now, buddy, because she's going down." And he went back to his cabin trying to get some clothes on. Only thing he could find was all he could find was that pea coat. You talk about saving somebody's life. That pea coat, and he said it himself, it was explained to him, when they finally got him to the hospital, his core temperature was between 94 and 96 degrees.
There was a priest there to
give him last rites, too.
Rites.
Yeah, sure they did. But the theory is that he had that life jacket on, and that insulated him, and then the pea coat kept his internal organs, right, the heart, the lungs, everything, warm. Now, that ain't
Can you imagine the suffering? 40 hours in freezing,
especially
getting sprayed by water?
Yes, but there's some heavy...
I mean, Dennis Hale later said that he prayed for his own death, while the three men around him were dying one by one by one. Yet praying for his own death, yet somehow he willed himself to live.
That's what's interesting right here, and I'm going to get to that right now. And this is what he told me, and it's in his book too. Okay. 2:00, blah 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 blah. The boat broke and down at on the 29th at 0200. That's when this happened. Once again, the steel is ripping like paper, and he started to hallucinate, whatever you want to call this, okay? But he said at some point in time on that, he always prayed. He was a very praying man, and he was a very religious man, to be honest with you. And he said that this apparition, a spirit, his guardian angel, whatever it was, came on that raft when the other three guys are gone. And he said, he leaned right down in his face. He says, "You must stay warm. You must stay warm." And this thing breathed on him, and his whole body got warm, just like that.
Ooh.
Dennis Hale's body. This apparition did this to Dennis Hale. Now call this near-death experience, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. So anyway, he's freezing. That's when he started saying, "Lord, either rescue us or take me." Okay. The boat before the last guy died, Fuzzy was his name, Fossberger or something like that. His lungs were filling up. He said, "I see land over there. Hopefully we'll come up against the land there."
Hallucinating?
And then,
Were they hallucinating? Or did they really
No,
see
there was
them?
definitely where she came to rest, okay? Well, that Fuzzy died because he had pneumonia, was it. And so Dennis Hale gets up on one elbow to look, because he's hurting unit now, man. He's hurting. And he doesn't see nothing. But all on his pea coat, there's some ice. He's so thirsty. He takes that ice and starts sucking on it. An apparition, his guardian angel, a spirit, whatever, came on there, and he shakes his hand. He says, he grabs some more ice, and here comes this. He called him Doc for some reason. He says, "I'm going to tell you right now, if you eat that ice, you're going to lower your body temperature. Now, don't do it." And he laid his head back down. A little bit later, he opened his eyes. He sees all these seagulls flying around. And he says, hey, now this is in his book. God doesn't seem to be listening to me today. Would you please go get me some help and get some rescue? He laid down, and a couple minutes later, hears this whoop, 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 and looks up, and it's a Coast Guard helicopter right over the top of him. The kind with the pontoons on it, so it can land on the water. So he raises his hand like this, and they go over and land next to him, and the guy, you've always seen the rescue swimmer go down, they start swimming. The water was only this deep. He stepped right up and walked up, and the Coast Guard guy says, this freaked my butt off. Because Dennis Hale reached up and he said, I love you. Where have you been? Because he thought they're all dead. So this is a dead man. He about had a heart attack, So they got another guy out, and they lifted Dennis into the helicopter, and they took off. And somebody else came and took the 3 bodies. I don't know if it was on a ship or an helicopter or what. They got in the hospital, 94 to 96 degrees, internal body temperature. Frostbitten feet. They didn't think he was going to live at all. But he was still able, semi-delirious, but still could convey, what was going on there, In a day or two, he started getting better and better and better. And when we were drinking, and he said there was not a doubt in his mind that he was not, well, okay, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. One other thing before I go any further. This was before Doc came and says you're going to lower body temperature. I just remembered this. He thinks he did die. The proverbial white light at the end of the tunnel you hear about, and stuff. And he actually saw heaven. That's what he's telling me. This big, beautiful golden bridge was there, and he crossed across. And there's his family members. He saw them, and they're having a big reunion. And he says, "What about my shipmates? Where are they at?" They're down at the bottom of this hill. And he went down to the bottom of the hill. Now he's telling me this as we're in a bar here, and I don't think he was drinking. To be honest with you, I don't think he was. He climbed up there, and there's the ship broken in two, but it's sitting there. He climbs up, and they're having a grand reunion. The captain and everybody else, And somebody says, let's go check the guys out in the stern. So they walk back in the stern. They're having a big reunion. They're having a good time. And the second engineer comes down this ladder. And he says, Dennis, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. This is not your time. And just like that, he gets sucked back through that vortex. And that's when he saw he came to and saw the seagulls. And then here comes the helicopter.
Wow.
So he said he was dead, but it wasn't his time. He was supposed to come back.
He was pulled back for more. You that's interesting. You said like he would, for a time, lean back and close his eyes, and then he'd open them and look out, and he'd, for a time, lean back and close his eyes. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I feel like I wouldn't survive that. I don't know if I just don't feel like I'm strong enough to survive 40 hours in the
He was a big guy, though. He had a lot of meat on his bones.
I know, but closing your eyes to me is like, I'm saying I'm not closing my eyes, because if I do, I'm going to close my eyes to death.
Right. 40 hours on that life raft, he lost 25 pounds. And we're not talking, running a mile here and working out, doing calisthenics. He's hanging on for dear life. You talk about aerobics. This has got to be the ultimate aerobic exercise there is.
I can't imagine what he went through.
I can't imagine it either. So they found him at 4 o'clock on November 30th.
Next day.
And he kept asking about other crew members. Can they find him? Can they find him? But the parallels here. Last trip, bad shape. She's in real bad shape. They couldn't make the damn stern where the lifeboats are, and they've got pictures of and this is very important. I was erroneous the first time I talked about this in one of the other tapes. I remember reading somewhere where the bow and the stern was separated by 12 miles. They found the stern right away. The Coast Guard did the next spring when I went out there. The bow was 5 miles away. Okay, if you think
two sections were 5 miles apart.
Yes. Here's the Gulf of Michigan, right? Mm-hmm. Here's Harbor Beach right there, and here's Saginaw Bay, and that's where they found him. And but 5 miles apart. Once again, had the Fitzgerald broken apart on the surface, they'd have been farther apart. She nose dived in.
Perfect example of the difference.
Exactly.
Perfect example. I wanted to just toss out some general information on the DanielJMorrell. This is 1966. a 603-footer iron ore carrier named for Daniel J. Morrell, who was the general manager of the Cambria Iron Company in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. He was a U.S. representative from Pennsylvania. The ship was built by the West Bay City Shipbuilding Company, launched August 22nd, 1906. I mean, that's just 3 years after Orville and Wilbur's first flight in 1903 at Kitty Hawk. But chartered by the Cambria Iron Company, the Morrell had a sister ship, the Edward Y. Townsend, and here we go again, these comparisons, like the Fitzgerald, like the Carl D. Bradley. This was the last run of the season for the Morrell. They were in tandem with the Townsend, their sister ship. They got caught in 70-mile-an-hour winds in Lake Huron, 20 to 25-foot waves. The Townsend says, this is too much for me. I'm turning back into the St. Clair River for shelter. But the Morrell kept on chugging, looking for the protection of Thunder Bay. And at 2 a.m., the death throes began. We have heard a lot about the brittle steel that was used back then. Ships built prior to 1948, the steel was too brittle. Have you thought about that at all as a contributing factor?
Well, sure. The Townsend, they after this happened, they laid her up in a humongous crack
In the deck, yeah.
in the deck at the same place that took the Morrell. So it was design error. I mean, it worked for all these years, but and these boats are just used, and there's been all kind of boats that survived their whole lifetime until they're finally cut up for scrap. But every time you hear the term largest boat on the Great Lakes, they've done something to make it bigger. And in the design of these things, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, you know. And once again, the Morrell had 2 screen bulkheads in there. It's a big, heavy screen that hang. When you think of a bulkhead being solid steel,
That separated the cargo holds, you
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Even the Coast Guard report said had it had the watertight bulkheads, something might have floated long enough, you know, to help them out here. Because this was pretty much 5-10 minutes. It's over with. And but out of that now, of course, they started having emergency radios that didn't have to have power from the back. You know, they had their own power source so they could get this Mayday out. Even though they didn't do the Fitzgerald any good, because she'd been nosediving the whole time. And that one time when the 2 sisters or whatever raised her up, she just never recovered.
Sure.
And especially if you got all the tackling, they start to roll forward. So they never got a Mayday either.
Were there any other conclusions from the United States Coast Guard on the Morrell other than what we knew from the sole survivor, Dennis Hale? I mean, it broke in 2 on the surface, and that's how she lays on the bottom, correct?
There's the book you want to get right there.
Ooh, is that? Oh, that's him.
That's Dennis Hale right there. I don't know if you want to get closer to that.
Man,
Man.
heck yeah.
That's the book. And,
I got to get that. Yeah.
He tells it just exactly the way it was in that book, and why he ran away from home as a child and all this. All that led to when he needed to maintain body temperature because it was not his time to go, and he was supposed to give these talks. What a you know, you think you're 15 minutes of fame, you know, this poor guy had to carry that load his entire life, you know.
I'm glad he had the opportunity that someone said, hey, you need to talk about this. And I'm glad he did that because that must have been great therapy for his mind. His soul.
You talk shipwrecks and stuff, we're all, you know, this can happen to anybody at any time.
Of course.
In a mechanical contrivance, an automobile accident.
Which is why I'm hesitant to always shift blame to a heavy weather captain who did something he shouldn't have done. I mean, these ships were not exactly structurally sound. You can't blame the captain or human. He is ultimately responsible. I get that, but these ships needed attention.
How many captains do you suppose would go to the office and say, "Hey, I'm not leaving the dock with this thing. This is in bad shape." Exactly my point. Paychecks being what it is, pensions being what it is. Hey, you roll your money or takes your chances. You know, that's the way. And a lot of times they keep coming up 7-Eleven, but every now and then
their
they
heavy weather
sneakers.
Trips were a badge of honor.
Right.
You didn't say no to that.
Well,
as a captain.
But had they not overloaded a lot of these ships in the interest of profit, then they for the design of the boat, they'd be all right. But don't mess with the roughest. Listen, I was on the steer. We went to where the Morrell went. Buffalo, right up to Taconite Harbor. I've been in and out of Taconite Harbor many times. And luckily, Lake Superior was always not too bad, 4 or 5 footers was it. But now Lake Michigan on the Richardson, that kicked my ass on a couple of occasions. I mean, you're talking 20-foot waves out there, just like the Bradleys. You got that wind and then the wave. Oh man, I don't want to think about it. You got to hang on. And if you want to experience that, go up and take a trip on the Badger. The car fare.
I don't have to take a trip on the Badger because I lived on a Great Lakes tug.
Folks at home, if you want to experience this, take a trip on the Badger.
I can remember like.